Two snakes had remained at Kevin's side, both comfort and shackle. He would never forget how it felt as Mr. Sherry's long nails clawed into his flesh, as the scaly, writhing bodies were pulled from his wounds, and the delirium of the venom they left behind in their panicked bites. Now the snakes both protected him, keeping the monsters of the bayou away, and guarded him, a prisoner in the shack where Mr. Sherry had left him. It was only when the moon was full once again that he found the strength to rise. He staggered to the door, but when he pushed it, rather than swinging open, it creaked and fell off the hinges. The sound as it hit the warped boards of the porch took the two women lurking outside by surprise. Mary and Cersei looked at the boy, now silhouetted by the rotten frame, his face ruddy with tears and countless scars blemishing neck, face, and arms. Two snakes hissed at his ankles. Warily, the boy raised his pistol, the moonlight glinting off the clinking chain of bullet chambers. Cersei looked at Mary. This him? He's barely grown. She thought of her sister. Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. She began to raise her weapon when Kevin spoke. Mr. Sherry sent you, didn't he? Kevin slowly lowered his weapon. He hoped they would let him explain. Mary narrowed her eyes, but before she could respond, a strange silhouette filled the broken frame behind Kevin. A hooded figure with a large snake coiled around their neck. Enough. The voice that spoke was hoarse and raw. The vipers slowly brought their arm up to Delara's fanged mouth. The snake flicked her tongue once, twice, and then gently sunk her teeth into the viper's wrist. The viper's body quaked as Delara's venom flowed through their veins and into their heart. The viper and Delara belonged to each other, and there would be hell to pay if one of them did not survive this fight. With Delara's venom coursing through the viper's veins, the two were preternatural fighters. But the hallowed gifts of the moon kept Kevin agile and deadly, and every shot rang true. Meanwhile, snakes of all sizes were rapidly converging outside of the shack, surrounding Mary Burgess and Cersei Elias, where they now stood back to back. Inside, bullets ricocheted and splintered the walls as Kevin and the Viper fought. Kevin had grown wary of violence and death. Yet, violence and death had not grown wary of him. Delara approached from the right, jaw unlocked and fangs dripping, and the Viper from the left. Kevin fired at the Viper, but Delara, lunging to protect her ward, intercepted, and Kevin's bullet met flesh. A broken, airy scream rang out from the shack. The Vipers sat catatonic on the floor, where they had collapsed in worry and grief, cradling Delara in their arms. Cersei had applied a healing salve, and Mary had bandaged the wound and staunched the bleeding. But the damage had been done. As Delara sought comfort around the Viper's neck, it was Mary and Cersei who set out to follow Kevin's trail. As they left, another visitor arrived. one of the moon's larger snakes, mottled brown, and the only survivor of the slaughter. The viper remained still as it approached, tongue tasting the air, slithering from right to left. When it reached striking distance, it paused. Its tongue tasted the air once more. Then it struck. But the viper was quicker, pushing one thumb down the snake's throat and gripping the head. The snake struggled to bite, its fangs dripping venom, but the viper's grip was too strong. The viper had been taught to respect predators, and that every predator has a weakness. This abomination was no different.
Delara, let us feast.
The viper moved quickly, taking the moon snake between their teeth and tearing, giving the smaller pieces to Delara. Then, with the now slack jaw of that snake, the assassin dug the fangs, still covered in venom, into their own neck. The effect was immediate. The viper heard conversations and screams as if of a crowd, reeling at the injection of raw experiential information. They heard Mr. Sherry convincing Kevin to join him in the circle. They heard the screams of those burned alive in Cherry's dirt circle. They heard Kevin crying and waking up from nightmares, and the screams of Mario Shankov. They felt Kevin's pain. It lasted only a few seconds, though it felt like hours to the viper. And when it ended, the viper finally understood. Kevin was not the enemy, and Mr. Sherry had to be stopped. The viper rose to their feet and gently wrapped Delara around their neck once more. From a pouch at their side, they pulled a face shield made of wicker and placed it on their face. They would face many more snakes before they removed it. The vile fumes of the black dye filled Ira Ozol's nose, and she fought the feeling of panic rising in her chest as she tightened the blindfold around her eyes. She did not know how Sherry had learned of the ritual, but immediately she could feel it had worked. As she wandered through the cool dark of her mind's eye, the visions began to come in bright, intense flashes. She stepped tentatively into the tub of black liquid, aware of the dye staining her legs and pooling in the surrounding mud. Pulling a razor from her pocket, she began to shred her robes and looked into the light. The truth of the Night Seer's vision was monstrous, and he had kept it from them all, pretending to a purpose to which he had no allegiance. Everything they'd done would bring pain and horror to those they loved, and she would say and do things she already regret. Ira cut at her right sleeve. It fell into the dye.
The Night Seer following her own tracks.
The razor cutting through her left sleeve.
Mr. Sherry telling Isaac of her betrayal.
The razor meeting with soft flesh.
Isaac raising his gun to her head.
Blood poiling in the gash and dripping into the inky black water. She retched again and wept. Kevin didn't make it far from the shack. Instead, he curled himself into a patch of brush and rocked. The screams of the viper over Delara, becoming one with the screams of Mario Chankov as she burned. He wished the moon would comfort him again, but she too was sick and tormented. He had failed. So he rocked and rocked It didn't take Mary and Cersei long to find him. He was tired, so tired. So he sat very still and waited. Next, voices. The Viper, now masked, had caught up to the hunting party as well. He had failed, and now he had been found. He did not make a sound as the women pulled him from the bushes.
Why is it?
The Viper's rough whisper began, muted slightly by the wicker mask.
That man wants you dead.
Because I want to stop him. If I don't stop him, people will keep dying, and the moon will fall.
How many have you killed?
The Viper asked. None. I made sure none of them died. Kevin was vehement. The only blood on my hands will be his. The Viper looked to Mary and Cersei, nodding at the expression they found there. They lowered their weapons. Mary was the first to speak. Child, I cannot in good faith strike you down, knowing what I know now. The Viper had told her of their vision, and it matched what she had heard from the hunters Kevin had bested. The bastard was probably lying to me too. Let's go see what he has to say for himself. Cersei offered her hand to Kevin, and when he cautiously took it, hoisted him to his feet. The Viper picked up Delara and placed her once more around their neck. They nodded.
To the mine.
The group of four cautiously entered Kingsnake Mine, to the sound of gunfire echoing from its depths. Mr. Sherry had told only a handful of hunters about his sanctum. They paused, listening. But as they did, the gunfire stopped. Enter now and witness the end of the Night Seer, or go your own way. The voice echoing out from the mine belonged to none other than Ira Ozolz. The four looked at each other, then headed deeper into the mine. At a junction, in the flickering light of the oil lamps, they found Ira Ozolz and the Night Seer poised in a standoff with weapons drawn. They were both ragged from fighting, and bullet cases littered the floor. And what's all this about? Cersei asked. His vision is nothing but a means to send us all to hell. I will not let him corrupt another soul for his gain, Ira said. And I... Here she took a deep breath, clearly winded from the fight. I'm going to stop him. I will cut out this false seer's tongue, and we can continue our work, the Night Seer hissed in reply, eyes still fixed on Ira. And I see you brought the boy. The boy isn't our enemy, Cersei said, walking confidently towards the Night Seer. We've been lied to. Kevin felt a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It was the Viper. He took a step forward. Listen, okay? Mr. Sherry, we need to stop him. Kevin's voice grew more confident as he spoke. Stop me from doing what exactly? Everyone turned at the sound of Mr. Sherry's voice, but he was not in the room. A trick of the mine's acoustics. He must be deeper down. Kevin began to panic as visceral memories ripped through him at the sound, but he was not so shaken to forget the gun at his hip. And now he raised it, ready to face Mr. Sherry once and for all. It was time to end this. There was someone, something in the mine, deep, trapped. keening with grief and rage. Never mind that Ira could not focus on the figures of Kevin or Mr. Sherry in her visions now. Both were blurry, hazy, blocked. Never mind that Isaac Powell had his gun trained on her and that 4 more arrivals had just complicated their standoff. That she could handle. But whatever was at the bottom of that mine, she wasn't sure any of them were prepared to handle that. The others continued their arguments, unaware Mr. Sherry buying time with meaningless words and empty smiles. Kevin stammering on about the moon, and that damn nun always quoting the Bible. Mr. Sherry was addressing them all. And what can this child give you that I cannot? Your honey words will no longer tempt God's children. Mary went to stand by Kevin's side. The boy was trembling, but he steeled himself for the fight. Cersei and the Viper joined Mary beside Kevin, forming a line against Mr. Sherry. But the devil gives excellent rewards, Mr. Sherry retorted. He looked at the 4 hunters before him and the 2 seers behind them. They were all talented hunters, and if they managed to work together, Mr. Orwell Sherry would lose his life. But if he had just 1 hunter on his side and a little time, he might make it out alive. Mister, please, whatever you're doing, whatever you have done, it can end here and now. Kevin trembled as he confronted the administrator once more. You're right, my dearest Kevin. It can, and it will. You'll help me more than you'll ever know. Farewell. And at that, he snapped his fingers again. From behind the 4 hunters, Isaac Powell moved his sight from Ira to Kevin and fired. And Kevin fell. In that moment, it felt as if time had stopped. The hunters froze in disbelief as Kevin's body crumpled to the ground. They did not try to stop Mr. Sherry and Powell as they ran towards the surface ward passage. The Viper fell to their knees and cradled Kevin in their arms. It was the dynamite lit by Mr. Sherry as he ran that brought them all to their senses. An explosion, a rumble, and a collapse. They were trapped in Kingsnake Mine. The lamps hanging from the walls stopped shaking as the dust and rock settled around the 5 hunters left in the mine. Cersei walked over to assess the damage to the entrance. They could dig themselves out with the tools left by the miners, but it would take hours. She looked back to the Viper and the boy. The Viper gently cradled Kevin as he bled out on the floor. Enemy or uneasy ally, no one deserved this. And then Kevin blinked. Where am I this time? The boy looked around and came face to face with Delara and the Viper, both shocked to see Kevin alive. Lazarus among us, Mary whispered as she and Cersei ran over to join them. How is this possible? Cersei asked as she kneeled down to Kevin. She raised his head to observe his now mending wounds, bone and flesh popping in like a mushroom in bloom. The moon. I can't rest until she's better. Kevin closed his eyes, curling into the arms of the Viper as he healed. Linus isn't supposed to break promises. Delara curled her tail around the boy's arm in silent reassurance. The 3 hunters exchanged a determined glance. They had seen how cruel Mr. Sherry could be. We will help you end this, the Viper spoke, but all nodded in agreement. On the other side of the mine, Ira gasped. The thing in King Snake's depths was coming into focus. We'll have to fight soon. Get the boy to safety, Ira said as she reloaded her gun. What the? Cersei was interrupted by a piercing wail. Kevin, still healing, thrashed, trying to crawl away from the sound. He'd heard that scream of anguish countless times in his nightmares. What is it? The Viper pretended to be calm, but the rasp in their whisper gave away their worry. She's here. He couldn't say more. Something was coming to greet them from the depths of the mine.